After the banquet in the great Yanchu capital ended without any conflict. In another place, a woman in green stood atop a tall building, gazing across the endless expanse of Chu capital. She quietly questioned whether leaving her hometown for cultivation had truly been worth it. Back in her small fringe town, there were only a few dozen eternal true gods, and with her strength she had been among the strongest there. Enjoying a comfortable and respected life. However, remaining in such a remote place would have left her with no access to powerful inheritances. And her chances of reaching the primal chaos realm would have been nearly non-existent. After arriving in Chu capital, everything changed. She quickly found an inheritance that perfectly suited her cultivation path and obtained valuable cultivation resources. With those opportunities, her strength increased dramatically. She mastered several primal chaos realm techniques despite still being an eternal true god, and she could now see a faint possibility of eventually breaking through into the primal chaos realm itself. Yet the opportunities came with a price. Although she had gained resources and prospects, she had also become entangled in dangerous struggles. Without the protection of her friend Marquis Chula, a relatively insignificant member of the imperial clan, she believed she would already have suffered a fate worse than death. Even though Marquis Chula had helped her, his limited influence meant he could not truly shield her from all dangers. After arriving in Chu capital, she established the Shallow Whisper Pavilion. Through her exceptional music and illusion techniques, she attracted many guests, including numerous nobles and powerful figures. She exchanged certain sacrifices and favors for cultivation inheritances and resources. Carefully navigating the city's complex political environment, she was extremely cautious, never daring to use her illusion techniques to manipulate the minds of noble guests. Nevertheless, despite her restraint, trouble still found her. In Chu capital, even first-class marquises fought viciously against one another. As a mere eternal true god, she had inevitably been dragged into dangerous power struggles, eventually becoming involved in a serious conflict connected to General Shui Kai. While she was lost in thought, she suddenly noticed two figures approaching. One was a man dressed in black, accompanied by a simple-looking servant. She immediately recognized the man as Great Saint Luo. The moment she saw him, her heart skipped a beat and she felt as though the entire world had brightened. She hurried forward to greet him. Inside the main building of the Shallow Whisper Pavilion, Luo Fun requested only a few of her finest musical performances. Morosa sat nearby eating and drinking enthusiastically. As a sector beast, he had little interest in music and simply focused on enjoying the food. Before visiting, Luo Feng had already gathered intelligence regarding the finest music and illusion experts who had performed at the recent discourse banquet. Among the three most outstanding performers, he specifically chose Yu Yui. He knew she originated from a remote town within Flamewind ancient country and was currently trapped in a dangerous dispute involving General Shui Kai. Luo Feng understood that in a place like Chu capital, avoiding trouble was impossible, even after his own arrival. When he had secluded himself and provoked no one, Marquis Chu Yuan, Marquis Chu Ji, and their guest elders had still joined forces against him. Only by transcending into the primal chaos realm had he gained enough strength to stand above such conflicts. Yu Yui began her performance. Streams of flowing water surrounded her and became musical instruments. The sounds produced seemed like the natural music of heaven and earth itself, resonating directly with universal laws. As the performance continued, Luo Feng secretly employed the 7 emotions of heart refining technique. The music amplified his emotions, drawing him deeper and deeper into the experience. Gradually, he became fully immersed. The emotions stirred by the music became so intense that tears unexpectedly flowed from his eyes. Yu Yui was startled. She had never expected someone of Luo Feng's status and strength to be moved to tears by music alone. However, she dared not interrupt the performance and continued playing while quietly observing him. She found it surprising because at the discourse banquet he had appeared completely indifferent. Yet now he seemed extraordinarily sensitive to her music. Eventually Luo Feng told her to stop. She immediately ended the performance. Luo Feng stood up and announced that the session would end there. As he departed, Luo Feng reflected on the nature of cultivation. Long-lived cultivators experienced countless events throughout their lives, causing their emotions to gradually become numb. The 7 emotions of heart refining technique could temporarily awaken powerful emotions, but excessive use would eventually dull them again. Therefore, it could only serve as a supplementary method. His true foundation remained the great destruction heart refining technique, whose constant tempering of pain and willpower maintained his fighting spirit. Before leaving, Morosa insisted on paying. Yu Yui initially refused any compensation, claiming that Luo Feng's visit itself was an honor for her pavilion. However, Morosa stated that his master disliked taking advantage of others and demanded a price. Left with no choice, she requested 10 cosmic sands. Morosa immediately paid and then followed Luo Fun away. Yu Yui personally escorted them out and watched until both disappeared into the distance. As she stood there, she felt both emotional and uneasy. Luo Feng had simply come, listened to music, and left, yet she sensed that the visit might have profound consequences. News of Luo Feng's visit quickly spread throughout Chu capital. Because Luo Feng had become a transcendent primal chaos realm expert and possessed a reputation for despising evil. Every action he took attracted attention. Most people knew that he had few hobbies aside from fine food, wine, and music. Therefore, his private visit to Shallow Whisper Pavilion was interpreted as evidence that he greatly appreciated Yu Yui's music and illusion techniques. The information soon reached Marquis Chu Yu, since Luo Feng had become one of his most important guest elders. Marquis Chu Yu carefully monitored developments involving him. He worried that other major powers might recruit Luo Feng or that any neglect on his part could damage their relationship. Remembering that Luo Feng had always enjoyed music, even during his days in Huyang City, where he occasionally became emotionally immersed while listening, Marquis Chu Yu concluded that Yu Yui had gained Luo Feng's favor. To strengthen ties with Luo Feng and indirectly help Yu Yui, Marquis Chu Yu immediately dispatched a trusted aide carrying an official token from his mansion. The aide personally delivered the token to Shallow Whisper Pavilion and informed Yu Yui that she could display it whenever she encountered trouble. She was also given direct access to contact the Marquise's people. Receiving the token filled Yu Yui with relief. In truth, even without it, Luo Feng's visit alone was enough to intimidate many enemies, including General Shui Kai. The token simply made the protection explicit. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her troubles had largely disappeared. Meanwhile, Luo Feng's life in Chu capital became remarkably peaceful. Before his breakthrough, many powers had challenged him due to conflicting interests. After transcending the primal chaos realm, however, even first-class marquises actively sought his friendship. Based on his observations, Luo Feng concluded that 6 of the 7 first-class marquises under Emperor Chu were relatively reasonable. Only Marquis Chu Yuan seemed unstable and dangerous. Luo Feng understood that Chu Yuan's madness stemmed largely from his cultivation path, which involved the primordial bloodline and his royal heritage from Thunder Ancient Country. One day, while cultivating in seclusion, Luo Feng received an urgent message from Marquis Chu Yu. He was informed that a trusted aide of Emperor Chu himself was arriving. Luo Feng was startled. Emperor Chu was one of the 13 supreme emperors of Flame-Wind Ancient Country. The arrival of one of his trusted aides could only signify something important. Luo Feng recalled earlier speculation that Emperor Chu might be interested in accepting disciples. He immediately left his cultivation chamber. Luo Sa, sensing that his master had emerged early, rushed over and asked what was happening. Luo Feng simply informed him that an important guest was about to arrive and told him to remain cautious. Soon afterward, 9 figures appeared in the sky. Among them was Marquis Chu Yu. The remaining 8 wore the armor of Emperor Chu Palace's trusted guards. Leading them was a towering figure known as General Zan Zhao. Marquis Chu Yu introduced the general to Luo Feng. According to available intelligence, Emperor Chu possessed 3 chief trusted generals. These beings were mysterious and extraordinarily powerful. They were not regarded as ordinary cultivators, yet their strength far exceeded that of typical experts. General Zan Zhao wore black armor covered in blood-red secret patterns. Black water flowed continuously within the armor, and his eyes appeared to be formed entirely from condensed black water. Merely looking at him created an overwhelming sense of silence and oppression, as though the surrounding world had fallen completely still. Luo Feng instantly sensed an enormous gap between them. He was astonished that a being who was supposedly not a cultivator could possess such terrifying power. He knew that Flame-Wind Ancient Country contained countless secrets and monopolized many opportunities connected to the mysterious Yuan. But General Zan Zhao still exceeded his expectations. Even Luo Sa secretly transmitted a message to Luo Feng. admitting that the general was so frightening that he felt he could be erased with a single move. Luo Feng respectfully greeted the general. After briefly observing Luo Feng and Luo Sa, General Zhan Zhao's attitude softened slightly. Then he delivered the purpose of his visit. The emperor had taken an interest in Luo Feng and was considering accepting him as a disciple. General Zhan Zhao directly asked whether Luo Feng was willing. If he agreed, he would immediately accompany the general to Emperor Chu's palace. If he refused, General Zhan Zhao would simply return and report Luo Feng's answer to the emperor. The fate-changing invitation left Luo Feng facing one of the most important decisions of his life. Luo Feng stood inside his cave mansion and looked up at General Xuanzhao in the sky. Without any hesitation, he immediately accepted Emperor Chu's offer to become his disciple, saying that it was his fortune that Emperor Chu was willing to take him in. In truth, Luo Feng had already expected this possibility and had carefully considered it beforehand. Among the 13 emperors of the imperial clan of the flame-wind ancient country, Emperor Chu was one of the most terrifying figures. The few times he had publicly acted, he had effortlessly suppressed ancient existences of immense power. Despite his strength, he remained low profile, had little negative reputation, and spent most of his time in secluded cultivation. Luo Feng understood that having such a master would help him avoid many unnecessary detours on the path of cultivation. Making the decision easy, satisfied with the answer, General Xuanzhao smiled and enveloped Luo Feng in an invisible force before taking him toward the palace of Emperor Chu. During the journey, Emperor Chu Yu congratulated Luo Feng on the opportunity. Luo Feng thanked him sincerely, acknowledging that it was Emperor Chu Yu who had brought him to Chu capital in the first place. Emperor Chu Yu, however, laughed and said that with Luo Feng's abilities, he would have risen quickly regardless. Soon they arrived outside the palace of Emperor Chu. General Xuanzhao instructed everyone else to remain outside while he personally escorted Luo Feng to meet the emperor. Emperor Chu Yu and the other attendants stayed behind. Luo Feng followed General Xuanzhao into the palace. The interior seemed to merge with darkness and chaos itself. After passing through it, they entered an ancient hall where Luo Feng immediately saw a burly figure seated on the floor. The moment Luo Feng saw him, he felt as though he were looking at the center of the boundless universe. The figure seemed eternal and unshakable, as if heaven and earth themselves could perish while he alone would remain. Even his breathing felt more profound and powerful than the operation of the world itself. Looking at him gave Luo Feng a feeling similar to facing the great Tao of life origin. He immediately understood that this was Emperor Chu. General Xuanzhao respectfully announced Luo Feng's arrival and then withdrew, leaving only master and future disciple alone in the hall. Emperor Chu smiled and began speaking casually. He revealed that he had spent some time investigating Luo Feng's past and asked whether he came from the primordial cosmos. Luo Feng was surprised that Emperor Chu had discovered this secret, but he did not hide it and admitted the truth. Emperor Chu nodded approvingly. He explained that lifeforms born in the primordial cosmos started from an exceptionally weak foundation. Reaching the level of a true god was already difficult, and achieving transcendence of the primal chaos realm was even more remarkable. He reassured Luo Feng not to be nervous, explaining that many ancestors of current cultivators had originally come from the primordial cosmos before migrating to the land of origin. Over countless years, their descendants had multiplied into the vast populations that now existed throughout the world. He also mentioned that the true native inhabitants of the land of origin largely resided in the eastern extremes. Emperor Chu then asked another important question, whether Luo Feng was the reincarnation of some ancient cultivator. Although the flame-wind ancient country possessed many powerful investigative methods, even they could not violate the supreme rules completely. Luo Feng firmly denied being a reincarnation. After hearing this, Emperor Chu became even more satisfied. He explained that among the 13 emperors, he had accepted the fewest disciples, only 2 so far. In his eyes, accepting a disciple was not merely about talent but also about compatibility of temperament and character. Luo Feng possessed both qualities, which was why Emperor Chu had decided to recruit him. However, Emperor Chu still gave Luo Feng one final opportunity to reconsider. He emphasized that the relationship between master and disciple was a major karmic bond, comparable to the relationship between close blood relatives. A master chose a disciple, but a disciple also chose a master. Once Luo Feng became his disciple, Other pinnacle existences in the land of origin would no longer be able to accept him as their own disciple. Luo Feng already understood the importance of such a decision. However, he also knew that very few pinnacle beings would be interested in him. And even if they were, some of those existences had committed terrible sins and were not people he would willingly follow. Having made up his mind, Luo Feng immediately knelt and performed a grand apprenticeship ceremony. He declared, "Disciple Luo Feng greets Master." The use of the name, Luo Feng, surprised Emperor Chu. Luo Feng explained that Luo Feng was his real name, while Luo He had only been an alias used because of certain karmic complications. Since he was now formally becoming a disciple, he no longer wished to conceal his true identity. Emperor Chu laughed heartily and officially accepted him as his third direct disciple. He then asked whether the karmic troubles surrounding Luo Feng required assistance. Luo Feng respectfully declined, stating that he could resolve them himself. This answer pleased Emperor Chu greatly. He appreciated disciples who were capable of handling their own difficulties. Since Luo Feng wished to resolve the matter personally, Emperor Chu promised to keep his real name secret. After formally accepting him, Emperor Chu announced that he had prepared 3 gifts. The first gift concerned the 2 inheritances Luo Feng had previously chosen: 8 Tribulations Lifeform, First Calamity, and Extermination of 72 Blades, Volume 1. Emperor Chu declared that once Luo Feng mastered the current stages, all subsequent inheritances of these 2 lineages up to the ultimate realm of Godly King would be provided to him free of charge. Luo Feng was shocked. The versions he currently possessed were merely the initial Godly King realm teachings and were already worth around 100,000 merit points each. Higher-level inheritances cost vastly more. Second realm Godly King inheritances were worth approximately 3 million merit points. While Ultimate Realm teachings could reach 1 billion merit points, many guest elders of the Flamewind ancient country risked their lives on dangerous missions simply to obtain such inheritances. Yet as a direct disciple, Luo Feng would gain access to them freely once he reached the appropriate level. The second gift was even more extraordinary. Emperor Chu produced a stone box containing 10 pale red fruits. The moment Luo Feng smelled them, he felt his soul being nourished. His thoughts became several times faster and clearer. These fruits were called primordial crystal spirit fruits. Emperor Chu explained that they came from a fruit tree nurtured by primordial crystal jade and had originally been bestowed upon him by the ancestor. Because they were no longer particularly useful to him, he was giving 10 of them to Luo Feng. These fruits were not native to the origin world and were incredibly rare. Their greatest effect was strengthening the soul and increasing one's harmony with the supreme rules, thereby greatly enhancing comprehension ability. They were treasures so valuable that merit points could not purchase them. Emperor Chu advised Luo Feng to consume 5 fruits while in the primal chaos realm and save the remaining 5 until reaching the first realm of Godly King. Luo Feng could clearly feel the deep concern and generosity his master was showing toward him. For the third gift, Emperor Chu asked to see Luo Feng's primary weapon. Luo Feng summoned the Bloodshadow knife. After examining it, Emperor Chu recognized it as a Godly King-level blade embryo. He then produced a mass of rainbow-colored mud and casually threw it onto the blade. The Bloodshadow knife immediately absorbed the material. Emperor Chu explained that the weapon's previous limit had been the first realm of Godly King. After receiving this material, however, its growth potential had increased dramatically and it now possessed the possibility of reaching the ultimate realm of Godly King. However, Emperor Chu emphasized that he had only supplied the primary material. Luo Feng would still need to gather supplementary materials himself because the cultivation of a weapon was ultimately tied to the cultivator's own path. A beam of light then entered Luo Feng's mind, transmitting a complete secret technique for nurturing and evolving the blade. Luo Feng was deeply grateful. Every one of the 3 gifts was immensely valuable and represented resources that ordinary cultivators could scarcely imagine obtaining. Emperor Chu then explained his philosophy regarding disciples. The ancestor had established a rule that even direct disciples must accumulate their own merit points. Resources could be granted, but achievements had to be earned. He further admitted that he was not particularly skilled at teaching disciples. Unlike Emperor Cheng, whose cultivation realm allowed him to guide disciples from many different paths, Emperor Chu specialized in fewer areas. He was especially unsuited to instructing practitioners of the great Tao of life origin. However, because the great Tao of destruction origin was also his own path. He encouraged Luo Feng to seek his guidance whenever he encountered difficulties in that area. Luo Feng acknowledged this respectfully. When Emperor Chu asked whether he had any questions, Luo Feng declined. He understood that his cultivation in the great Tao of destruction origin was still relatively shallow and that he remained in a phase of rapid growth. So it would be more beneficial to seek advice later when he encountered genuine bottlenecks. Emperor Chu nodded approvingly and informed Luo Feng that, as a direct disciple, he would gain access to numerous special missions before they became available to members of the imperial clan or the marquises. Finally, Emperor Chu encouraged him to cultivate diligently and become a godly king as soon as possible. With some emotion, he remarked that none of his disciples had yet reached the godly king realm. Luo Feng immediately vowed to work hard and then respectfully departed. After leaving the hall and entering the chaotic darkness outside, Luo Feng felt a surge of excitement. Among all the treasures he had received, the primordial crystal spirit fruits fascinated him the most. Simply smelling them had already benefited his cultivation tremendously. And he could hardly imagine the effects of actually consuming one. Since arriving in the land of origin, this was the first treasure he had encountered that felt so extraordinarily rare and precious. Unable to wait any longer, he immediately began making his way back, eager to start cultivating and test the fruit's effects. Meanwhile, Emperor Chu remained seated in the hall, quietly watching his newest disciple leave. Although Luo Feng was now his third direct disciple, Emperor Chu could not help feeling some regret. Compared to figures such as Emperor Chang, whose cultivation had reached such heights that they could easily identify and solve their disciples' problems regardless of cultivation path, Emperor Chu's teaching ability was limited. What he could provide were precious resources, opportunities, and support, while the rest depended on the disciple. As he gazed toward the endless universe beyond the hall, Emperor Chu began reflecting on the future. He wondered what taking disciples truly meant. The origin world itself would eventually come to an end one day. When that time arrived, how many cultivators would survive? Even the ancestor was advancing through the darkness toward an uncertain future. Emperor Chang had already embarked on the same path and might eventually assist the ancestor. Although the 13 emperors stood at the pinnacle of power within the land of origin, Emperor Chu knew that outside this world their strength might not be so extraordinary. As for his disciples, they might not even possess the qualifications necessary to leave the origin world. Thinking of this, Emperor Chu decided that the bonds formed within this world should be treasured while they lasted. He gently shook his head, closed his eyes, and once again entered deep meditation. After leaving the palace of Emperor Chu, Luo Feng returned to his own cave mansion where Morosa was already waiting and immediately came forward to greet him. Smiling, Luo Feng informed Morosa that he had officially accepted Emperor Chu as his mentor. Although General Xuanzhao's invitation had already strongly suggested this outcome, Morosa had still been worried that some unforeseen complication might arise. As a sector beast, he constantly feared that his existence could bring danger or trouble to Luo Feng. So hearing the confirmation personally relieved him greatly. Luo Feng then announced that he would enter a period of secluded cultivation, during which no one should disturb him unless an important matter arose. Since he intended to consume the primordial crystal spirit fruit, he needed complete concentration, apart from maintaining contact with Emperor Chu and allowing Morosa to communicate with him through telepathy. He would effectively isolate himself from the outside world, meaning even the primordial ancestor, Moyu Qingyan, and Emperor Chu Yu would be unable to reach him. After Luo Feng entered the quiet room, Morosa remained outside feeling extremely excited. In the land of origin, sector beasts had historically met tragic ends, and except for the one protected by Tianmu Kingdom, every known sector beast had eventually died. So Morosa constantly lived with a sense of insecurity. However, Luo Feng's acceptance as Emperor Chu's disciple significantly improved their situation. And Morosa believed that once he evolved into a pinnacle sector beast, and with Emperor Chu standing behind Luo Feng, his circumstances might become even better than those of Tianmu Kingdom's sector beast. He also reflected on how the corpse of great Saint Beiyu had greatly increased his strength. And if he could obtain more corpses from powerful primal chaos realm experts, he might even have a chance of becoming a godly king. Though he understood that the barrier between the primal chaos realm and the godly king realm required a fundamental transformation of the internal sector within his body. Inside the quiet room within the Star Tower, Luo Feng took out the pale red primordial crystal spirit fruit. Merely smelling its fragrance brought joy and clarity to his soul while dramatically accelerating his thought processes. He knew this treasure was exceptionally valuable, bestowed upon Emperor Chu by primogenitor Yan Feng, and so extraordinary that it could not even be cultivated within a source world. Luo Feng reflected on the vast difference between himself and his mentor. Emperor Chu stood at the peak of the land of origin and possessed the support of primogenitor Yan Feng, enabling him to understand the history of the land of origin, glimpse traces of the future, comprehend profound truths about source worlds, and even investigate secrets beyond them. With a perspective spanning unimaginable stretches of time and even the fate of entire worlds. Luo Feng, however, focused on advancing step by step. His immediate goal was to reach the peak of the land of origin, repay Emperor Chu's kindness, and eventually help his former master, mountain-sitting guest, obtain revenge. Looking back, he realized how poor he had been before arriving in Chu capital, lacking even a suitable godly king-level inheritance, whereas now he possessed the inheritances of 8 Tribulations Lifeform and Extermination of 72 Blades, both surpassing the ultimate god-king realm, along with access to cultivation resources enjoyed by imperial elites for countless years. Luo Feng then consumed the primordial crystal spirit fruit, which dissolved within his body and released energy that nourished his soul, dramatically enhancing it. His thinking speed increased to more than 20 times its previous level. His soul became lighter and more ethereal, and many cultivation difficulties became clear almost instantly. Realizing the tremendous effect of top-tier resources, he immediately immersed himself in studying his inheritances at the core region of the origin ground in the primordial universe. His divine power incarnation continued observing the complete great Tao of life origin, and with the fruit's enhancement, his perception deepened as he discovered it was composed of 6 major branches, each containing profound mysteries. He compared this to the 10 fundamental laws, noting that while individual understanding was achievable, integrating them into a unified whole was vastly more difficult, and only through perfect integration could one reach the ultimate realm of God King. This made him appreciate the enormous gap between ordinary godly kings and the most ancient supreme existences. Although many elites had consumed similar resources, Luo Feng recognized that effectiveness depended on talent, and his own exceptional foundation allowed his comprehension to surge continuously. Over time, he cultivated relentlessly, studying all 12 branches of life and destruction origin, the first calamity of the 8 Tribulations life form, and the extermination of 72 blades. Occasionally relying on Morosa to demonstrate the mysteries of destruction origin. Throughout this long period, no one disturbed him. Eventually, after slightly more than one era, the fruit's effects faded, and his thinking slowed, making the return to normal feel uncomfortable. Examining his gains, Luo Feng was astonished. All 12 branches had advanced substantially, several reaching top-tier primal chaos realm standards, and the life spirituality lineage even reaching the pinnacle of that realm. He understood how extraordinary this was, estimating that without the fruit, it might have taken 100 or 200 eras to achieve the same results. The fruit had effectively increased his cultivation efficiency by more than 100 times. More importantly, it had greatly improved his ability to overcome bottlenecks. Luo Feng now felt that he had fully comprehended all mysteries within the life spirituality branch. However, becoming a godly king required more than comprehension. He still needed to merge all those mysteries into a single unified whole. This process represented a qualitative transformation rather than mere accumulation of knowledge. He realized that this was the reason why so many pinnacle primal chaos realm experts remained unable to become godly kings. Understanding every mystery was difficult but achievable through sufficient study. But integrating them into a perfect whole was vastly harder. Remembering Emperor Chu's instructions, Luo Feng decided to conserve his remaining primordial crystal spirit fruits. He possessed 10 in total, with 5 intended for use during the primal chaos realm and 5 reserved for the first realm of godly king. Based on the tremendous effects of the first fruit, he concluded that the remaining fruits should only be consumed at the most critical moments. His plan was to continue cultivating normally until the 5 major inheritance lineages all reached the pinnacle of the primal chaos realm. And only then would he consume the second fruit to maximize its benefits. After ending his seclusion, Luo Feng stepped outside, The world around him appeared different. Flowers, grass, and trees seemed overflowing with life, their vitality resonating with his own cultivation. He even felt that with further progress, he might be able to transform ordinary plants effortlessly. Morosa, the primordial ancestor, and Moyu Qingyan quickly arrived to greet him. All of them immediately sensed that Luo Feng had changed. Moyu Qingyan felt something fundamentally different about his master but could not identify exactly what it was. Morosa sensed that Luo Feng's life aura had become overwhelmingly powerful, even more terrifying than the vitality possessed by a sector beast. The primordial ancestor likewise observed that Luo Feng's presence subtly influenced the operation of the illusory universe within him, a sign that Luo Feng's power had grown tremendously. Unable to contain his curiosity, Morosa asked whether Luo Feng was about to become a godly king. Luo Feng simply smiled and replied that he was still far from that level. After remaining in seclusion for such a long period, he felt tired of cultivation and wanted to relax. He proposed visiting Yu Zhoufang for a meal. Morosa immediately became excited, and the primordial ancestor and Moyu Qingyan were equally enthusiastic. Yu Zhoufang was a primal chaos realm cultivator who had reached the highest level in culinary arts, and his dishes were considered treasures comparable to rare cultivation resources. As the foremost culinary master in Chu capital, he rarely cooked for ordinary guests and generally reserved his hospitality for godly kings and transcendent primal chaos realm experts. So the opportunity to dine at his establishment was something all of them eagerly anticipated. After consuming the primordial crystal spirit fruit, Luo Feng devoted himself entirely to cultivation for more than an epoch, focusing on comprehending and improving his various cultivation paths. Once the effects of the spirit fruit were fully exhausted, he gradually relaxed his routine. Rather than remaining in seclusion, he began spending time enjoying life in Chu capital, frequently visiting Yu Zhoufang to enjoy exquisite cuisine and often going to the Shallow Whisper Pavilion, where he listened to music and experienced illusion techniques combined with the 7 emotions of heart refining method. His increasing appearances in public drew the attention of the major powers throughout Chu capital, which noticed that Great Saint Luo he had become much more active. On one occasion, Luo Feng traveled alone to the Dark Hall of the Flame Wind Association in Chu capital. Upon arrival, he was personally welcomed by the hall's master, a woman dressed in golden robes. Although she appeared ordinary and concealed her aura completely, she was in fact Marquise Xin Huo, a pinnacle-level expert of the primal chaos realm. Among the Flame Wind ancient country's countless cultivators, it was exceptionally rare for someone outside the imperial clan to be granted the title of Marquis. Demonstrating her extraordinary status, Marquise Xin Huo warmly greeted Luo Feng and noted that this was his first visit to the Flame Wind Pavilion since arriving in Chu capital. The two sat opposite each other while attendants served fine wine and fruit. Luo Feng explained that he had come to sell treasures, and Marquise Xin Huo immediately assured him that as a direct disciple of an emperor, he would receive the highest purchasing prices available, while ordinary clients were often negotiated down to maximize profits. Luo Feng's status entitled him to special treatment. Luo Feng then revealed a collection of spoils acquired during his previous battle against 5 powerful opponents, including 3 formation diagrams radiating terrifying power, broken golden hoops, 3 black nails, a long weapon staff, Marquis Lu Yin's blade, and Great Saint Beiyu's double-edged axe. The moment Marquise Xin Huo saw the staff, she immediately recognized it as Marquis Chu Yuan's godly king weapon, whose value far exceeded the other items. When she noticed Great Saint Beiyu's axe, her expression changed slightly, as the death of Great Saint Beiyu had remained an unsolved mystery throughout the land of origin. But the appearance of his weapon strongly suggested that Luo Feng himself had been responsible for the kill. Although Marquise Xin Huo drew her own conclusions, she remained silent, as the Flame Wind Association maintained extremely strict confidentiality rules, with every transaction recorded and revealing client information strictly forbidden. Even a branch master like her would face severe punishment if she leaked information, which was one of the reasons the Dark Hall maintained such a strong reputation throughout the land of origin. The treasures were then evaluated through an invisible appraisal mechanism within the Dark Hall, and during the process, Marquise Xin Huo praised Luo Feng's strength. Great Saint Beiyu had been recognized as one of the strongest combatants in the primal chaos realm and possessed extraordinary survival abilities due to his mastery of the great Tao of life origin. Yet he had still perished. Luo Fun merely smiled and neither confirmed nor denied her speculation. The valuation proceeded item by item. The three formation diagrams were assessed at 260 billion cosmic sand. The broken golden hoops, due to requiring repairs, were valued at 90 billion cosmic sand, the three black nails at another 90 billion, and the blade of Marquis Lu Yin together with Great Saint Beiyu's axe added another 90 billion, bringing the total to 530 billion cosmic sand. Luo Fun accepted the appraisal, noting that he had not even brought all of his spoils. Attention then shifted to the most important item, Marquis Chu Yuan's godly king weapon. Marquis Xin Huo explained that it was a first-realm godly king weapon and relatively simple by such standards. So the Dark Hall's direct purchase price was only 500 billion cosmic sand. She recommended placing it on consignment, as godly king weapons attracted wealthy buyers, including actual godly kings, and a public sale would likely generate a higher return. Due to Luo Feng's status, the commission would be only 5%. With a starting price of 600 billion cosmic sand, Luo Feng agreed and chose a consignment period of 10,000 days. The announcement quickly spread throughout the land of origin, and when Marquis Chu Yuan learned that his former weapon was being publicly auctioned, he was furious but powerless after his previous defeat. Determined to recover it, he sought help from his elder brother, Marquis Chu Ji, and began gathering funds. Eventually, the consignment period ended, and Luo Feng was informed that bidding had reached 700 billion cosmic sand. After commission, he received 665 billion and was highly satisfied. He chose to leave the funds on deposit and requested to purchase materials from perfect tier primal chaos layer creatures, offering 100 billion cosmic sand per set. Marquis Xin Huo confirmed the arrangement, and the bounty quickly attracted widespread attention, even among transcendent primal chaos realm cultivators. In Wanji Kingdom, certain powerful creatures agreed to provide small portions of their bodies in exchange for long-term benefits, allowing Luo Feng's research into perfect tier primal chaos creatures to progress successfully.